A virtuoso performance in the Rose Bowl, a great escape that wasn't necessary, it seemed, for a long time for Texas, and the Sugar Bowl was postponed. This is the College Game Day podcast, a quick edition on New Year's night following the Rose Bowl. Rece Davis in Pasadena, along with Pete Thamel. We just left the Rose Bowl Stadium, got back to our respective hotel rooms. And Pete, I said this to Ryan Day on the podium, talked to Desmond Howard and Joey Galloway in the post-game show afterwards. I don't remember seeing a better first half performance of football. Now, Ohio State was just fine, excellent in the second half, but that first half was so overwhelming, so overpowering. It, in terms of the stage, it reminded me of maybe the Alabama Notre Dame national championship game, the old Miami Nebraska national championship game in the Rose Bowl. But both of those opponents that were overwhelmed, you sense that might happen, going into the game. This was different. Ohio State was everything that a lot of us had thought they were going to be great in the preseason expected them to be. It was just a brilliant performance.
It's hard to know where to start, Rece, because it was like which rock made the most impact in the avalanche, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like it was just like one thing after another thing after another thing. I guess what surprised me, right? You talked to all these scouts and coaches for a breakdown like I did, and the up front, Ohio State was not supposed to dominate them on both sides of the ball like they did. Did they end up with 6 sacks or 7 sacks?
I think while I had my earpieces in before the trophy ceremony, I thought I heard 8, but maybe it was 6 or 7. I can look it up while you're talking.
I saw negative 26 rushing yards.
That's right.
And again, it made sense. Oregon couldn't run the ball early, got sacked 8 times, and then they had to pass the ball. So they rightfully ignored the run. So they weren't going to have any traditional rushing yards. And and remember, they had 0 in the first game, Rece. And I think they only had 2 TFLs. So just an absolute bludgeoning on both sides of the line. Now
I've got 8. I've got
8 sacks. I mean, 8 sacks is like what you do in a bye game against a directional Michigan, right? Like you don't 8 sack the number 1 team in the country. Like they're just who has a very good offensive line. Josh Connerly is a top 5 tackle in the sport. He'll probably be a guard in the NFL. He's very, very good. Cornelius, the other tackle, is very good. They might not have been great inside, but it just, the defensive line performance simply didn't go that way. And then I felt like the thing that surprised me the most in this first matchup was Oregon ran outside zone at will and just chunked off 6 yards every time. And that just didn't exist today. Just never happened, never started, never went. So all credit to Justin Fry, the O-line coach of Ohio State, for all those combinations. They moved the ball just fine, and Chip Kelly called an unbelievable game. Misdirection kept him off balance. And then the defensive line was just a ragdoll.
Yeah. I mean, they dominated inside. The edge rushers were good. I thought that Tyler Hamilton in the middle was, just dominant. And, as far as the sacks go, I felt like a lot of them were coverage sacks. So I want to give a lot of credit to the secondary and the linebackers for Ohio State too, because we're watching from field level, and granted, sometimes when, that's why they don't show the all 22 coaches film from film level or from field level. You can see more. But from our vantage point, standing on the sideline, it's not like you would go, oh, there's Tez Johnson running wide open. Oh, there's Trayshawn Holden. How do you miss him? It was like, where in the world do you want him to throw it?
Yeah.
It was like there were 2 extra guys covering Oregon's pass catchers. And Jim Knowles, Chip Kelly. I saw Chip just very briefly after the game. I'm sure you got a chance to talk to him. And I mean, that was the quintessential Cheshire Cat grin. He was thrilled. I told him, I said, man, that was brilliant. I said, just spectacular the way. I mean, right off the bat, the misdirection they got. I think the first play from scrimmage, if I remember, was to G. Scott, the tight end, explosive play. Yep. Then they got then they brought Jeremiah Smith in motion and got him, and nobody home. Made one guy who had a scant chance maybe to trip him up, miss, and he ran to the end zone. They dialed it up And Pete, on the subject of Jeremiah Smith, I asked him on the trophy stand because he's a man of few words, young guy, still finding himself there. Say, can anyone stop you? He said no. And he's right. At least certainly not one-on-one because he basically dared Oregon to play man. So if you ask someone if they can be stopped and they say no, I think probably you deserve to be best in game. Best in the game brought to you by Old Dominion Freight Lines, helping the world keep promises. And Jeremiah Smith helped the Buckeyes keep the promise of avenging that loss in Eugene, coming back, and after the loss to Michigan, talking about we have 4 games to play. Well, they're halfway home. They've won 2 of them, largely thanks to the exploits of their star freshman receiver.
Yeah, well, I picked up a good nugget in the locker room, Rece, that I appreciated. It made my my reporter Spidey senses smile. One of the behind the scenes rallying cries, I was told, from the Ohio State coaching staff that they hammered home pretty significantly to the players after the first game was the only time they stopped us was when they put 12 guys on the field. When they had 11 guys on the field, they couldn't stop us. The only time they stopped us was with 12. So that was brought to my attention. And look, Dan Lanning, whether the 12 is intentional or not, is still one of those like nebulous lore things that we'll never probably really know. But Dan Lanning didn't shy away from that, correct? So you know what makes coaches tick, right? You know how much coaches think about other coaches. That nobody told me this, but I'm just going to guess that was probably not well received in Columbus. That the geniusing of Dan Lanning and the sharp footballs and the football, the fawning over the Belichickian way to exploit the rule book. No coach likes to lose. They certainly don't like to. You can see a staff meeting where there was some harumping about that, right? I'm projecting a little bit. So anyway, they just kept saying it's 11 on 11. They never stop us all day. They didn't stop us all day.
Yeah, I'm not trying to start anything either, but got a little intel during the week that those 2 guys, not because of anything personal or anything like where they have disdain personally for the other, most professional rivalry type thing, that they might not be president of the other guy's fan club. Most
they're not Shane Beamer, Brett Bielema yet, but
right, maybe not, but internally maybe headed that direction. So
think about it. They run into each other a lot on the recruiting trail too.
Yes, they
right?
do. Yeah,
it's there's a small there's in the penthouse it can get a little crowded, right?
Yep.
Like they're running into each other a lot in those high bid NIL awards and all that kind of stuff. So that makes sense. I've never caught that there's like outward aggression there, but I just think there's
agree.
I just think
I was just framing it as I attributed it to rivalry and the fact that last game was 1 point and Oregon won the Big Ten and all of those things. That was kind of a kind of went both ways, but you know what, it makes it good because both of those programs are going to be around for the long haul and at the top of the sport for the foreseeable future. Now,
aren't they 1-2 in winning percentage too?
Yes, and among active coaches right now, their winning percentages were there. This I think that makes Dan, and I want to say 35-6, and it's like 60, 68-10 or whatever it is for Ryan Day, which is kind of preposterous and remarkable. And now they go in early favorite, 5.5-point favorite against Texas in the next round. But let's talk about what happened with Texas today against Arizona State. Very fortunate to escape. Never really should have let it get into that position. Yet it's something that has recurred with Texas over the course of the season. They haven't put people away. Oftentimes due to turnovers. There was a big turnover in that game that allowed Arizona State, a couple of quick back-to-back possessions and got them back even in the fourth quarter. But it's sort of the opposite of what Ohio State's doing right now, which is hitting you in the face with a shovel and then not letting up. And Texas has bolted out to these leads, in both of their playoff games, both against Clemson and then against Arizona State on New Year's Day, and they let them back in the game. And today they had to throw a 4th and 13 touchdown pass in overtime to keep from losing the game. Arizona State was one play from moving into the Cotton Bowl, and Texas was able to get out of there in double overtime.
Yeah. So I am uniquely qualified for the analysis of playing with food because I have a toddler who's
Yeah,
almost 3 who
yeah,
plays with this food. Texas played with their food today. Like they
yeah.
batted it around. Their inability to exploit the physical mismatch is probably a little bit of a red flag, right?
Mm-hmm.
For all the talent, and they have all the talent. Now, look, what we learned with Ohio State the last 2 weeks, when you flip the ignition, it can get pretty scary pretty
Oh yeah,
fast.
yeah.
And to Ohio State's credit, they flipped the ignition and it's going right now. Nobody's going to question that. So I really just I just don't think for whatever reason is, I'm sure it frustrates Sark because he knows he has a good team and they've been excellent. They've been generally excellent.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know if the sum has been greater than the parts, right?
Yeah,
Just when you
yeah.
when you look at how much talent they have on the offensive line, they got an unbelievable tight end, they have great skill. I think Quinn Ewers is a very good college quarterback, right? And I think
Mm-hmm.
he'll
Yeah.
be a fine prospect at the next level. Like it just for some reason they have not been able to drop the hammer and go. And I want to say they scored a touchdown on their first drive of the game.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
And then they returned. Yeah, 2 plays. They
and
had two
yes,
explosive pass plays,
yep,
and they had punt return. Yeah.
and then a punt return, and then they just kind of fudded around a little bit and didn't score again until the fourth quarter. Touchdown again until the fourth quarter. So, and again, look, these games aren't going to be like unimpeded 82-yard drives, right? That's
Right.
not
Yeah.
reality. But and look, I give Arizona State unbelievable amounts of credit.
Oh man,
Like
guts.
unbelievable,
Yeah.
like onion after onion. Like they felt like the 14 seed that was just pulling, the run of the picket fence for the 3 pointers, pulling out every stop possible. Go to a 1-3-1 like that. That was what this game felt like. They were an underdog. 14 seed, 15 seed might be a bit dramatic, but that's just kind of how when you see what they had to do to get in the game. You got Scattaboo throwing the 42-yard touchdown pass. You got the punter throwing the defensive tackle on like the creative fake punt. Like they did what it took. They coached aggressive, and I appreciate the way Kenny Dillingham went there to slay the giant.
Mm-hmm. They obviously had kicking issues, but I'll tell you the one thing that worries me. And Arizona State's got a solid run defense. They were just outside the top 25 in yards per game, and they gave up 3.8 yards per carry on the season. Texas got 1.8 yards per carry against Arizona State today. That's borderline inexcusable. Look, Arizona State. Sometimes it's hard to quantify when a team is playing with that much aggression and hair on fire, nothing to lose, being counted out, motivated all about that. Emboldened by the brilliance and the competitive fire of Scatterboo, which is as as great as any we've seen in recent
Oh
years. At the risk of being hyperbolic, but there have been a lot of great competitive guys, but I
yeah,
mean, Tim. You're right. In some ways, it reminds me of Tim Tebow. You just can't. You kind of can't tackle it.
yeah,
I know different
yeah.
positions and all of that, but it was such a tough-minded effort. Desmond said in the post game today after the Rose Bowl that it was one of those games where and he didn't mean this as a slight at Texas at all, but I agree with him in this regard. One of those games where you came out of it feeling better about the loser than you did the winner. And this is a point you brought up earlier this year on the podcast. And as I say this out loud, it's coming to mind. You said it after the Ohio State Oregon game, and you said it was one of the features of having a 12-team playoff. You thought that many times you would come out of a game and you feel a little better about the loser. Sometimes not
Mm-hmm.
to take anything away from the winner,
Mm-hmm.
but you'd go, well, they're going to be fine. That was a great performance. And man, Arizona State was so impressive today. But you got to give Texas credit for making enough plays to win the game. And after so many times when a big favorite squanders, and that's what they did. Arizona State fought back, and they deserve credit
Sure.
for that. But Texas squandered the lead, and when they did, a lot of times panic sets in. And Texas maintained their composure and won the game, and now they're 2 games away from the national championship now.
Yeah, I mean, 4th and 13.
Yeah.
They need Quinn Ewers in overtime, right, to throw the ball to Matthew Golden, 28-yard touchdown pass. And yeah, I'm sure Nick Saban threw his headset somewhere over Oklahoma on his plane ride home, because that guy was that wide open as an old defensive coach. I'm sure he was pulling for his guy Sark, but
he didn't mind a 4th and 31 coming open for him.
That's fair. That's fair. But any coverage bust, I've learned, like he views football still from the prism of secondary play, and covered 2 will put him in his grave. He likes to joke about. So that was some kind of bust. Let me tell you. Yeah. To let somebody get behind you in that situation was there. But again, what a showing for Arizona State. I agree with with what Desmond said. And give them credit, right, Rece? Like they signed Kenny Dillingham, resurrects them 3-9, self-imposed bowl ban year 1. They roll out year 2, and they said, look, they hadn't won an outright league title, I believe, since '96 when they went to the '97 Rose Bowl. Yeah. So they said, we want to keep doing this. So we're going to keep the guy here who happened to be born in Scottsdale and attended school here and wanted his whole career to come back here. We're going to pay him market rate. We're going to invest heavily in football. We are going to channel this. And look, some schools don't channel it. Like they don't. They have their moment. They flash in the pan, and then they disappear. So I give everybody at Arizona State in administration credit to say, hey, he has made this attainable. Let's keep making it attainable. And that Big 12, man, that line between 1 and 8 is as thin as it is anywhere in the country. Like there's it's really, really difficult.
It's going to be a test now for Arizona State, Pete, because they are in their first year in the Big 12, but they are following the Big 12 formula. The teams that win the close games finish at the top. The teams that lose the close games finish at the bottom. Arizona State this year won 6 of 7 one-possession games. This is the same formula TCU used to go to the national championship game. They did, and then the next year they lost them all. Oklahoma State, Kansas this year lost a ton of one-possession games. And then last year, Oklahoma State won them and played in the conference championship game. And this year, it weren't necessarily one-possession games, but it proved that it wasn't that they were that good, because they returned everybody and they finished at the bottom of the conference. So I'm not predicting the demise for Arizona State. I'm just saying, I'm amplifying what you said. The margin in that conference is very small. And it was that way all season for them. And they came out on the good side. And, now they'll have to go into the post-Scatterboo world, one would imagine. Yeah. And sure. Oh, boy, just the heart and soul. And
what a player.
Yeah. Yeah. We have joked and had some fun with the size of his head. The size of
was that mentioned on GameDay today?
Yes, it was. The size of his heart, his figurative heart, and the lower intestinal fortitude of that guy. That's what everybody would like to have. So we have Texas and Ohio State in one semifinal, which will be in the Cotton Bowl. Penn State, after beating Boise State, advances to await the winner of Georgia and Notre Dame, which will be tomorrow afternoon as we record this on New Year's night, 4:00 Eastern time, 3 in New Orleans, after the horrific events in the wee hours of New Year's morning that left at least 10 people dead. It's a great city, and the game is of secondary importance, but still certainly important to the people participating in it on a different level. Everyone understands perspective without a broadcaster having to say it, but sometimes you feel like that needs to be pointed out. Everyone understands that. And I think certainly thought Marcus Freeman in his interview with Scott Mempelt was extraordinarily eloquent, as you might have expected from him. Sure. And, had great perspective on it from a faith perspective, from a leader of men perspective, and from, a good concerned human being for others perspective too. And, mentioning how, all of the guys had gotten together and prayed for those who've been impacted by that tragedy.
What I told the team is, in the toughest moments, the culture of any program of a nation is revealed. And I have a lot of faith this country will rally around New Orleans and support all the victims and families that were affected.
We'll look forward to the game, but certainly keep those who were injured or lost in that attack in our minds and our prayers as well. Pete, great job this week, man. I always brag on Pete. Let me tell you, Pete wasn't even on the air, and he was like signaling me things to make sure that we were locked in on what was happening in New Orleans. And just great teammate, man. I appreciate you, and it was great work today and great work all season. We got more to go, but just wanted to say that as we bring in the new year and get the new year off to a positive start there.
Thanks, Rece. Appreciate you. You're the best teammate. And it's never work at the Rose Bowl, right? Today, these are the good days. So honored to do it. Honored to do it with you. And look forward to a busy, fun stretch we got coming up here.
You bet. Thanks for listening to the College Game Day podcast. We encourage you to download this wherever you prefer to get your podcasts or subscribe and never miss an issue or an episode.